What's this? Another video about adapting TV series characters into the Railway series, so soon after the last one? Yes. I think I've finally figured out a way to get the characters from Day of the Diesels working in the Railway series style. Now I'll admit my history with this special is fairly minimal to say the least. I mentioned in my Hero of the Rails video that I enjoyed that film when it came out, which made season 13 all the more disappointing when I saw that a few months later. I'd hoped that the specials may still have something of a quality threshold that the regular episodes lacked. Then Misty Island Rescue happened, confirming that nope, the specials were now rubbish as well. Legend has it I'm still recovering from the disappointment. So I didn't watch Day of the Diesels when it came out, especially after hearing reviews saying that it was no better than Misty Island Rescue. However, I'm still familiar with the characters introduced in the special, since they would continue to appear in the show. Adapting the characters into the Railway series felt like quite a big ask, but I think I've figured something out. It's time to start drawing. I remember a lot of criticism going around in the Thomas fandom during the lead up to Day of the Diesel's release surrounding Belle. A firefighting locomotive feels like a very gimmicky concept, it's hard to argue with that. I recall Belle being treated as a sort of monkey's paw situation, since her basis, the BR Standard 264 tank, is a well-liked class of engine and would probably work quite well on Sodor, but not as a gimmicky toyetic character like Belle ended up being. It seems like an obvious choice to just make Belle a regular tank engine that performs intermediate mixed traffic duties on the main line or one of the branch lines, but firefighting trains do exist. You may remember that in my Mighty Express video I brought up modern examples of firefighting trains such as those used in Switzerland when I redesigned Rescue Red. These are typically used to put out fires in areas that roads can't reach. Steam engines used for firefighting duties were less common, but not non-existent. At least one member of the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Class D1 was equipped for putting out fires. So whilst it might seem a bit odd and gimmicky at first, and let's face it, it kind of is, the concept of a firefighting steam engine could potentially exist in the world of the Railway series. My idea is that Belle was acquired by the North Western Railway after her withdrawal from British Railways, or possibly purchased by a preservation society to help rebuild another member of her class, with the North Western Railway acquiring the parts that weren't used. With line-side fires becoming a problem in the summer months, even with spark arresters fitted to the engines, it was decided that a long-term plan had to be drawn up to find a way of combating the fires. The 4MT tank, which had been sitting around in a dismantled state at Crovan's Gate Works for quite some time at that point, was restored and is now jointly owned by the North Western Railway and the Sodor Fire Service to put out fires in places that cannot be easily reached by road vehicles. Belle resides at the same town where Sodor's main fire station is located, possibly Crosby or Cronk. When she's not putting out fires, she often does light shunting work, mainly so that she's in steam for when there's a fire that needs to be fought. Now to mention the elephant in the room, Belle's paint scheme. Why have I made her red if she's blue in the show? Well, I figured that if she's partially owned by the Sodor Fire Service and is part of their engine fleet, it figures that she'd probably have the same colour scheme as the fire engines, and red is a pretty universal fire engine colour. Frankly, it seems a bit surprising that Belle wasn't red in the show, although I do have one theory. Perhaps someone on the production crew was worried that Belle would look too similar to Arthur if painted red. It might seem like a stretch, considering that the two engines are distinct shapes and from different eras of the show, but bear in mind that Ryan was very nearly painted red, and his concept art even refers to Arthur, so I don't doubt that he was brought up when Belle was being designed. At any rate, you might remember that in my AU, Arthur was only a visiting engine and normally works on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, so it's unlikely that the confusion would arise. And so, here is the finished drawing. I had a bit of trouble with Flynn at first. He is based on a 1964 Oshkosh W800 ARFF. This is an American design, whereas in the UK pretty much all fire engines prior to 2007 were manufactured by Dennis Specialist Vehicles. Why would Sodor have an American fire truck from the 1960s? Funnily enough, the previous video in this series actually helped me out a bit. You may remember that I decided to make Connor a museum piece owned by the Earl of Sodor and based at Ulfstead Castle. Perhaps the Earl's fascination with continental vehicles extends beyond just trains, and maybe he acquired an old fire truck as well. I'm calling him a fire truck because he's American, so I figured that it's appropriate. Unlike Connor, who is confined to a plinth due to loading gauge issues, Flynn has been restored to working order and is often brought out of the museum for rallies, parades and other special events. It was during one of these special occasions when Flynn met another fire engine, returning home from helping to rescue a cat from a tree. Toby, who had just arrived to drop off a group of enthusiasts, thought he was seeing double. 4 fire engines! The younger fire engine didn't have a name, but was excited to see another fire engine in the wild, especially one that looked so different from him and his siblings. Flynn introduced himself and told him about all the daring rescues he had performed during his time in the States. The young fire engine, who was a little underconfident and timid, was really mesmerised by Flynn's tales and decided to keep Flynn's stories in mind during future missions to help build his confidence. He met Flynn a few more times afterwards, and eventually the two agreed that the younger fire engine should be called Flynn Jr. Flynn Jr. is now a much more brave and confident fire engine, and can frequently be seen helping to put out fires and perform rescues without thinking twice about it. With all that said, here is the finished drawing. Here are the last 2 engines for this video, Den and Dart. It's true that there are other engines introduced in Day of the Diesels, notably Paxton, Sydney and Norman. However, I've already adapted those characters in prior videos, so there's no point going over them again. In the TV series, Den and Dart are the shunters at the Sodor Diesel Works. However, in the Railway series there is no Sodor Diesel Works. Crovan's Gate Works is capable of repairing both steam and diesel engines, and presumably electric engines as well. With Crovan's Gate Works in the Railway series seemingly being bigger than either the Steamworks or the Diesel Works in the TV series, it can be assumed that more shunters might be needed. I've covered Crovan's Gate Works shunters in previous videos. Obviously there's Victor, who works a narrow gauge line within the works complex, and at one point there was a standard gauge shunter called Aubrey, who is now owned by the Crovan's Gate Preservation Society. Like I said in a previous video, my theory is that Crovan's Gate Works has some level of independence from the North Western Railway, and so the Class 47, who is officially not a North Western Railway engine, is owned by the works and thus is still a Sodor engine. It seems unlikely that a Class 47 would be used for shunting, however. It seems more likely that they are some sort of utility engine, perhaps making trips to the mainland or other parts of the island to retrieve parts and equipment to deliver to the works so that they can continue building and repairing engines. This means that there is still an opening for a standard gauge shunting engine at Crovan's Gate Works, or perhaps two if you will. Enter Den and Dart, who were acquired by the works second hand and put to work at the works complex, mainly to move equipment and engine parts to different parts of the complex, making the process of building and repairing engines just that little bit easier. I've decided to paint them in a similar livery to Victor, crimson with yellow lining and wasp stripe buffer beams. Den and Dart had already worked together before arriving on Sodor and have a strong bond with one another. Dart is generally the more active of the two and can often be seen darting around the works complex, hence his name, whereas Den is a bit more reserved and thoughtful. Dart knows him all too well though, and sometimes speaks on Den's behalf, which is sometimes appreciated and sometimes isn't. But, with that said and done, here is the completed illustration. And there you have it, the characters from Day of the Diesels, plus one reboot character, in the style of the Railway series. It was a very red set of characters this week. I promise that wasn't the intention. This was a set of characters I've been putting off for a while, but I think I've managed to adapt them in a way that kinda makes sense for the Railway series continuity. Let me know what your thoughts are by commenting, giving the video a like and a hype, and maybe subscribe if you haven't already done so.